One at 7:01. The meeting is now open. Would you please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The next item on our agenda is consideration of the agenda. Any changes that anybody would like to make to the agenda? Sarah?
I did mention this to you previously, but Chapter 20 is a part of the zoning ordinance rewrite for the Zoning Board of Appeals. And so I don't know if the Planning Commission would want to hold off and wait to deal with that during the rewrite, or if you want to deal with it at this time. I forwarded it on. The Zoning Board of Appeals made that motion to send it to the Planning Commission. So that is how it ended up on your agenda after talking to Bill about it, because it was forwarded. So that is something that should be considered if you want to deal with that or not at this time.
Well, I'm in favor of dealing with it tonight to start the process. Any other comments? Okay, we're going to move forward with it tonight. Thank you, Sarah. Okay, in consideration of the agenda, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the agenda as stated.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thanks, Cole. Discussion? No discussion, let's call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. The next on the agenda is public commentary. Please keep your limited to the agenda items only. That's important tonight. If anybody would like to speak, would you please give your speaker form to Laura Carlton, the secretary, and she'll call you up. I know we have one. Okay, we're going to limit it to 2 minutes. If you need more because of limited speakers, I may grant more. Okay, Laura, would you call the first speaker, please?
Yes, Mr. Sean McCausland.
Okay. Sean, you may have to turn that mic on. Hang on, we're going to have help for you in a minute.
Sean McCausland, 5431 US 31 Eastport, I own property there, also known as Eastport Market. Comment tonight just in regarding the review of the zoning regulations. I just want to make some comment on, I know it's under consideration. The way I understand it now is basically if someone comes in with a proposal, it's with their T's crossed, their I's dotted, it's pretty much an approval process. And there is no review of that proposal. With that, I just wanted to state my thoughts on, I know that there's Dollar General has been approaching folks trying to purchase their property in the area. And I just want to make comment on that so everybody kind of would have some thoughts from myself and other people who have been, I've heard from since we brought this to light. And, Dollar General, in my mind, brings very little value to the community. When you look at a business like that, they have a handful of minimum wage jobs that they bring in. What they really do is hurt the small local owned businesses. They leverage their buying power to undercut our local businesses, drive them out of business. And what you're left with is basically a Dollar General that has very little to offer. 40% of their products are imported from China. They have no fresh meats, no fresh produce. The concept was really designed for inner city, urban areas, low income areas that are called, they call them there's no grocery stores there. So they fill a need in those locations, but they found that if they go out into rural areas, they can tag on to local businesses, take their business with their buying power, and then try to put them out of business. In my mind, it really, the concept of Dollar General doesn't fit within, you know, what we see here in Torch Lake Township and Eastport. The buildings, to be blunt, are ugly. It looks like an oversized storage unit. They slap a big yellow sign on it and call it a retail store. Again, serving, you know, very minimum wage jobs. You know, we have Lake Michigan, Torch Lake here. Do we really need a Dollar General plopped in between them, you know, with our beautiful farms and, you know, roadside stands? I don't really feel there's a need for it. You know, people live here in this community and up north here in this area because it's rural. You know, you can move to Traverse City or Grand Rapids or Flint if you want those types of operations. They already have a store in Central Lake, which is about 10 miles. They have one in Ellsworth, which is about another 10 miles. Their stated goal, and you can read about it, is to have a Dollar General within 6 to 8 miles of each one, which is just ridiculous in my mind. Why do they want to do that? Well, I think it's to just continue to grow that top line growth for them. They're supported by private equity, folks on Wall Street. If you look at their stock price over the last 5 years, it's gone from $60 to $220. And how they do that is just by adding more and more and more stores. Thousands of stores across the country, and especially across the Midwest, Michigan, Wisconsin. But if you look a little deeper into their financials, which I just happened to glance through, you can see that in 2017, their long-term debt was about $2.7 billion. Well, today, it's about $12.7 billion. So what that means is they just keep adding and adding stores. It's not really a healthy company because their bottom line's not great, just their top line growth. So the people that are there, those executives, just keep growing the top line, opening more and more stores. But when that debt comes due, folks, what's going to happen in my mind is you're going to have, what do they look at? People always look at.
Sean, excuse me.
Yes.
2 minutes are up. I'm going to give you another 2 minutes.
All right, I'll be brief then. Those underperforming stores, I used to work for a big corporation, so I know kind of how this stuff works. They go out and look at how do we cut our expenses? How do we get our bottom line healthy when the Wall Street investors come calling? And what they do is they look at their underperforming locations. Where do you think those underperforming locations are going to be? Not in the inner city where they do well. It's going to be in these rural areas. You guys drive by them all the time. You see 1 car, 2 cars in those parking lots. They're going to come out here. They're going to cut all these stores. You're going to have a bunch of empty properties around northern Michigan, Wisconsin, all over the place. And we're going to be left with nothing but an empty shell and an ugly building. And they're going to try to put other folks that are local business owners out of business using their buying power and their assets backed by the Wall Street folks. So I would just ask that the approval process for anything that goes like that, you know, I know you guys are looking at that. I would ask that you continue to look at it because I think it's important to the community to have a voice and let it be known. When I started talking about it at my store, it was overwhelming the people that they really don't want that type of business here. It just doesn't fit with the aesthetics of what Torch Lake Township, Eastport, and the surrounding community really is about in my mind. So thank you for the time. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Sean.
Late entry. All right, Mr. Howard Willard, you're up.
All right, I hope you left that on for me after the good spell we had earlier.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So my name's Howard Willard. I live at 2153 San Marino Trail, just down the street. And I just wanted to make 2 comments. First of all, I'm a relatively new property owner, and I spent my first summer up here. And I'd just like to comment that I think the care that you are taking in thinking about how this community evolves through the Planning Commission and through a really careful consideration of giving thought to how the community evolves, I think is very commendable. And the way I read the topic on the agenda here of, evaluating the planning commission rules to think about whether or not we shouldn't allow a bit deeper consideration of some changes, I have to tell you, I view very positively. It doesn't prevent you or prevent an applicant from being considered. It essentially allows some things, instead of being waved through automatically, it just allows the community a chance to comment on them and the planning commission a chance to evaluate them. And when you have something as valuable as this, I think it's worth protecting. So I commend you on taking that action and committing the time to do that. And then I, as a relatively new member of the community, I have to comment that as a frequent shopper in Eastport Market, I find that market is one of the highlights of having bought property here. And I think it adds a lot of value. So I think it's worthwhile to think about how to continue to have that in the local farm stands and others, because I think they make this community special. So I just thought I'd comment on that. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Howard. Anybody else wish to speak? Okay, moving on to number 5, correspondence. I have some late correspondence that came in. By the way, this correspondence I'm about to mention, every one of the commissioners have copies of it. I'm not going to go in detail. I'll just give you the general idea of what the correspondence is and who it's from, because they're rather lengthy. The first one is Carla Ritchie. She's expressing her concerns regarding the issue with the Dollar General. The next one is Arlene Westhoven. She's also expressing her deep concern regarding the Dollar General rumors, if you will, in Eastport Market. The next one is Sean Boyer. Same thing applies, concerns, although she feels it's an asset to the area.
Say she's for it.
Excuse me?
She's not the same as the other two. She says, I myself am for Dollar General.
That's what I said. She thinks it's an asset for Dollar General to come in. The next one is Mary Van Valen, I believe, and she's against Dollar General type stores coming in. I'm hesitant to use the word Dollar General because we really don't have many facts regarding this, but it's certainly a concern of our community. Okay, number 6, conflict of interest. Based on the agenda tonight, do any of the commissioners have a conflict of interest with any of the items on the agenda? If you do, please speak up. No conflict of interest. Number 7, purpose of the special meeting. Village business / commercial zone district discussion. What we're going to do tonight is we're going to review this in as much detail as we can on the current zoning regulations regarding this type of issue. We're going to discuss options we may have. Sarah's going to help us through this process. Her job is to keep us out of trouble. It's a full-time job. But if we come to a decision, that's great. If we don't, we may move it to a different meeting and further discussion. And just so everybody understands the process, once we come to some type of resolution in changing the zoning ordinance, then we have to have a public hearing at a different meeting. So there's a process that has to take place. And after the public hearing, then it has to move through the proper chain of command to Antrim County and to the board. We simply make recommendations to the board, but we do all the research. So with that, Sarah?
Sure. So there's a memo that was in your packet that you all had the opportunity to review, but I'll just briefly kind of touch on some of the items in there. So at last week's meeting, there was the moratorium language that the Township Board passed to limit permits and site plan review, special use applications in the commercial zoning district and the village business district. And they passed that moratorium based on concerns over maybe the size of retail stores, In the village business district, we allow for retail stores that are up to 15,000 square feet to be a permitted use with site plan review. And we also allow that retail use in the commercial. It doesn't have that same size restraint on it, but when looking at it, they thought may as well take a look at both of them to see if it makes sense. So moving forward, the planning commission kind of needs to figure out if we need to make changes, we don't need to make changes to the ordinance, and move this through rather quickly. That moratorium is good for 60 days, which is a very short window since it takes about 60 to 90 days to get an amendment through of the zoning ordinance. But it's also important because we are stopping any permits or review process for anybody on those properties. We want to make sure to continue to move this forward as quickly as possible, not doing it, a knee-jerk reaction, but at the same time, thinking through things and keep on moving. So we may need to have an additional special meeting or something before the next meeting, just depending on what tonight.
Sarah, if I may, the reason we're hearing this we're at the request of the board, is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So I put together 3 kind of options. This is just to kind of get you started thinking about ways that we could move forward if it is a concern related to retail operations. One is that we could reduce the maximum size allowed as a site plan review and then make the larger size as a special use permit. Or you could move all of retail into a special use permit if you don't want to split the size difference. And looking at some communities that they have done that, they've reduced the size down to closer to 5,000 square feet for retail stores in their village areas. So that allows some retail to go in as a site plan review and then the larger retails to go in as a special use permit. So, and just to, I know the planning commission is familiar, but for the public, the site plan review is something where the planning commission, the township board has determined that this is compatible with the neighborhood, this use, and it could be retail, it could be one of the other office or something like that. That use is compatible with the neighborhood. So the planning commission's role is to review the site plan, make sure it has all the required information, that they're meeting the ordinance in their review. A special use review application requires a public hearing prior to the planning commission making the decision, and it has a little bit more discretion. That special use permit is saying that this use is generally compatible in the zoning district, but there may be locations that it's more appropriate than other locations that you would consider the neighborhood in that. Also, that special use permit allows you to require maybe some buffering or screening to try to minimize the impacts on the neighborhoods under the special use application. So getting back to that, sorry, I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew kind of the difference between the two when we're talking about it. So you could change the size requirements in the ordinance related to the retail. You can also, we could add some additional landscaping, buffering, and parking requirements that would help to minimize any negative impacts on the neighborhood. Aesthetic reasons, typically, if you have some landscaping up on the road or foundation plantings right adjacent to the buildings. Our current ordinance doesn't have a requirement for any landscaping. But this is something we could put into our commercial, the village business and the commercial districts to help with that. Also moving the parking, requiring it on the side and the rear, so you don't have these large parking lots out in front of the commercial businesses, are options for, and you could do it for one district and not the other. So just to keep in mind, we are looking at both because that moratorium was for commercial and for the village business. So you can do it for both, one or the other. And then the other option that I put out there was kind of a combination of both. Maybe look at reducing some sizes, moving them up to special use permits, but then also requiring some planting materials or parking locations, just because I think those are good requirements. From just a professional kind of standpoint, especially the village areas, those are kind of your neighborhoods, mixed use. You have a lot of residential in there, so you want them to feel more residential and They're not your main drag roads with high speeds. They're usually slower speeds. You end up with more pedestrian foot traffic on the road. So you like to have some of the landscaping, some of the aesthetic things that maybe you wouldn't require in your commercial kind of more strip development. So just in general, it's a good practice. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with, potentially the way the ordinance is. It's just a policy choice. But usually kind of those village areas, because they do have that residential component, you definitely want to make sure that your commercial uses are compatible with your residential uses that you have there. So this is also kind of the opportunity to look at any other kind of uses or anything you just see in those districts where you're going, why do we have this? Does this make sense? Is this compatible with what we're doing in our review? So I would encourage you to kind of have that discussion and that thought process to make sure that that whole district, the list of uses makes sense while we're here dealing with it. It might help you kind of get to the end of your decision.
Okay. Recommendation number 1, to review the requirements. Just so the commissioners get a feel. Sean, how big is your store, square footage?
15,000.
15,000. Okay. Let's talk about that for a minute. Does anybody have a feeling on size requirements for the zoning change? For somebody new coming in? Cole?
I have a question, I guess. In looking at this, if I understood it, when I read this, Sarah, you said that they would, where they talked about in village business, the retail stores less than 15,000 square feet, you said they would require a site plan review?
Yes.
Where is that stated?
It is, well, it's part of it, and well, it's not really in this part of it. I was going to say it's usually right in like 10.2, that opening paragraph talks about it requires planning commission review, but it's going to be in site plan review section at section 18.02. So it's any land use or development located in, and you go down this list within the village business district requires that site plan review. So it's not an excluded use. Further in that paragraph, we say 1 unit, 2 unit residential, do not require the site plan review, where they're just requiring you to get the land use permit from the zoning administrator.
Where did you say this was? Under
You lost me too, Sarah.
Yeah.
Sorry, okay.
under
I'm looking at 10.2.
10.2, well, it doesn't say it there. Some of the districts say it, who approves it, so you don't have to look there. It's going to say it in 18.02.
And that's the site plan review chapter?
Yeah, so it says site plan review required, a site plan shall be required to be submitted and approved by the planning commission in the following instances. And then it's letter A. It says a land use or development located in, and it says commercial operations within the village business, village residential.
Okay. So that would apply to all of the permitted uses?
Any permitted use that is commercial, or any use that's not a single family or 2-family requires site plan review.
Okay, so
I understand now. Thank you.
thanks, Cole. As we move forward with this, would it be beneficial to incorporate in some way, shape, or form in 10.2, part of 18.02?
No,
Okay.
it's okay. It's just in some of the districts, just because I've been working on this part of the rewrite of the zoning ordinance, they're just not consistent, that introductory paragraph.
Right now, Eastport and across the street are all village residential? Or is that commercial where Eastport?
It's village business.
Business, excuse me,
Yes.
village business.
Yeah,
Eastport.
all of the property right on, and there's some maps.
Yeah, I'm trying
I have
look
to
at it.
apologize, we've been working on digitizing this map, and then when we print it, it doesn't print the legend, and so then there's some copies, so these are not the best quality right at the moment, so I'm gonna have to work on them a little bit more. But just for discussion tonight. So, yeah, we've got the Eastport Village zoning map
Okay.
is the
Sarah,
top one.
I want to stop for a second. I'm looking at the zoning map
Yeah,
and I'm looking at the colors, so let's be specific here.
Mhm.
Where US 31 and M 88 meet and they go forward, I'm guessing past the Eastport Market. It looks to me like that zoned village business, is
yes,
that correct? Okay,
Yeah.
and then behind that is village residential.
yeah.
Okay, got it, thank you.
And that's because of your print,
Yeah,
because of what
and
the
that-
printer, how it prints, I'm
Yeah.
gonna have them change those colors so that they're further apart.
Good idea.
Because on the computer, it looks one way, and then once you print it, it turns
Yeah,
out
I
another
thought
way.
that was all, that's what's.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that kind of the brick red, the darker red is your business, and then the cherry red is gonna be your residential.
Okay, we're not the first ones that face problems with new business coming into our community.
No,
So what have other townships done regard to this?
it's kind of it's a mixed bag, really. It's, I would say most of them have reduced the size from 15 down to something 5 or 7,000 square feet. Empire, I was just reading theirs recently. They went through a similar process. They did a moratorium, all of that. They're down to about 3,000 square feet as a site plan review, and then larger than that. In some districts, they don't allow, other ones, they're special use permits. It is important when picking that number that you're encouraging retail uses that actually can work. You don't want to do it too small, because then you can't get a retail store, or you might have a negative impact because you're only attracting a certain kind of retail store that can fit into small areas, or you're kind of encouraging people maybe to put up a strip mall type of thing with small retail space in them. But most of them, well, not most of them, generally, I guess, a lot of them have gone to a smaller square footage as a use by right for retail.
If we were headed in that direction,
Mhm.
I'm not saying we are, but if we were, and we keep referring to a site plan review,
Mhm.
would you walk us through that, please?
The process of a site plan
Mhm.
review? Sure. Yeah, if somebody comes in and does a site plan review or would like to submit for it, typically they come in, they talk to myself and Jackie about the process, kind of give us a overview of their project, any kind of, see if we have any red flags related to it. They submit, we review it to make sure that it has all the information that's required in the site plan review section of the ordinance. So, that there's setbacks on there, the property lines are on there, they've got their parking, your site plan that you see what that looks like. We review them. And then once we determine it's complete, then we would forward it on to the planning commission for your consideration. So then the planning commission's going to look at that application with the site plan and make a determination based on our standards in the zoning ordinance for your site plan review. And then they'd have to get their land use permit and move forward with construction.
So from there, I understand the process, but from there, then it's either passed or denied.
Right.
And if it is passed, it goes to Antrim County, comes back, it
No.
goes right to the board.
It's done.
It's done. It
Done.
doesn't go to the board.
You make the decision. You have the final determination on the site plan.
So not going to board, then let me build on that too. So it doesn't go to board, it all relies on the planning commission's action.
Yes, the
Okay.
planning commission makes a decision on a site plan.
Is that historically what the pattern by law, or is this something that was established just here at the township?
Typically, site plans are approved by the planning commission and do not go to the board. I've not seen a site plan in any community that's gone to the board. I don't know off the top of my head, the law, if it says that the planning commission is required to do it, or if it is something that you could send to the board.
The training sessions I took, they all emphasized that the board, I'd never got an answer that it was required by law or it's just unique to
Yeah.
our township. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's one of your primary functions, is reviewing site plans and approving or denying those based on the ordinance.
So give us a couple of examples why it would be approved and why it would be denied.
A site plan?
Yeah,
Well, a site plan would be approved if it met all the standards that are in the ordinance. Those standards are, let me pull them up real quick. So your standards for approval talk about, the lot's appropriate, that you've got your stormwater managed, that the landscaping's provided as required, which is not required. Your parking is on there as required, that the parkings are the proper dimensions as required in the ordinance. Emergency access, traffic, public road access. So really the role as the planning commission in a site plan review is you're going through and you're making sure that it meets the zoning ordinance. You're checking all those things off that are dimensional requirements. So your lot size, your lot width, all your setbacks are being met. Your trash, your fencing, your buffering. And that's all laid out in the zoning ordinance. So there's, I go back to this, there's not really any discretion in that site plan review because you're just confirming that what they've proposed meets the whole zoning ordinance.
So we can't go beyond, excuse me, we can't go beyond what's in the zoning ordinance. We got to make sure
Right.
the zoning ordinance is the way we like it. All we're doing is applying it to the circumstances.
Exactly.
Okay.
give us a reason why it would be denied.
It would be denied if they did not put something that was required on there and they told you they were not going to do it, even after you told them they had to do it. So say they're required to have 40 parking spaces and they only put 30 parking spaces on there and you say, we can't approve this, it doesn't have enough. And they say, well, I'm not going to put my 40 parking spaces on it. It's typically its site plan on its own is not denied because individuals, when they apply, know what's required of them. It's in the ordinance and they go through the process and they put the proper number of parking spaces and landscaping. They don't apply for things that doesn't meet it.
But does public opinion enter into this?
It does not.
It does not.
No, that's not a standard. That's not a requirement because there's no public hearing. All of our meetings have the public commentary at the beginning and typically at the end of them, our regular meetings do. And so people are welcome to provide comment, but there's not a public hearing. There's no noticing. It's not put in the newspaper for a site plan review.
So I'm playing what if, how am I doing? If an applicant applies and starts construction on this and we call for 27 parking spots and he puts in 5, do we stop him?
Yeah, if he has a land use permit and is doing construction and he starts operating, we would say you're in violation of your site plan and we can revoke it or demand.
So we can
compliance.
revoke it.
Yes, we may.
Is that a planning commission meeting or a board meeting? Take your time, Sarah.
The planning commission can revoke it. It doesn't talk about the process for it, but it does say if a site plan may be revoked by the planning commission. This is in section 18.13 of your zoning ordinance at any time in the development process. If the application or plans are erroneous, and it goes on to a bunch of other things. We can also file in court for an injunction and go that route as well. We're not limited to just revoking it.
So there is a process.
Yes.
Question? Jason? No? Anybody?
One more, just in the same thing. So everything really settles on the fact of what's in our zone ordinance that we're going to require in a site plan to be there. So if something is not there, we really can't add it as a
Right.
planning commissioners. I just want to make sure.
Yes.
And so therefore a concentration, let's say, I know the other factor was on landscaping and all this, review of that, and we had, haven't been on this type of rezoning. And is there any factors that should be suggested change or enhancing that factor? Because when your letter to us, the commissioners, talked about one option, two option, and then combined on it, and I went through the landscaping, and it seems kind of weak, what we
Yes.
have.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree. Your landscaping requirements, are not really requirements, and there's no numbering, and
That's,
it's typical for a rural community as well. So it's, there's some communities that they feel that there's enough landscaping, and there's other communities that feel that it's very important during construction that the trees are replaced, because typically, development is kind of clearing the property. And if we don't require it, to be kind of blunt about it, if you don't require it, they're not going to do it, and you're not going to get what you like. And then you're going to complain about it later on, that it looks ugly because there's no trees left because they cleared it.
okay, 'cause so anything that's not in there, we ask for it, they can say, no, we can't really, that's not a denial type of basis.
Right, because they're meeting their ordinance, because
That's-
ordinance doesn't require it.
Okay,
Yeah.
I seen that, other areas went along with some of the things we wanted in
Yeah.
the committee. I was real fresh at that time.
Yeah.
And they said, okay, no problem, they would do it, they did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, unless there's some specific kind of development standards for the use, where, you say for retail or offices or something that they're required to do plantings or put in a buffer. There's some of those. One I'm thinking of is bed and breakfast require a buffer in certain districts because it's next to the residential. But that's very use specific. It's not a general, applies to all, commercial operations.
Okay, that leads into another question when we talk about plants. Let's say we require them, no problem. Well, they die.
Right.
Is there any requirements to maintaining some of that buffer?
There is, because your site plan is how the property is supposed to look until you ask for an amendment to your site plan.
Good. Okay, that's a key concept that I was
Mhm.
aware of.
Bill, if I could. Sure. I have a question. It was helpful to hear the size of Eastport Market. I guess I don't have that.
Cole, can I ask you, I got a lot of people that call in, they can't hear us very well
Okay,
on YouTube.
I'm on,
Okay.
sorry. I'm trying to picture in my mind, can you tell me the size of an average Meijer store? How many square foot is that?
120,000.
Thank you. And the other thing is, how does that relate to, or how should we think about, when I look at this map, it doesn't appear to me we have a lot of commercial property in the township. There is a bit of village business, but none of them seem to be very large lots. And it seems to me even a 15,000 square foot store with the required parking and setbacks and things probably may not be possible on any of these. And I'm wondering your thoughts on how that should, when we think about sizes, should we be considering what's available when we do this?
I think you should consider what's available, but you should also consider that they could, more than one lot could be purchased and then added together. So, what we have, and because our minimum lot size in our village business is small, and a lot of times you see people trying to get closer because they're splitting, they're selling, they want more lots. But at the same time, you're right, on the commercial aspect, you have this parking, you have other requirements that need to be met, so they need a little bit larger lots. But I would expect if somebody, needed more space and needed more parking, that they would try to purchase a neighboring property to do that, even if you're buying 3 houses that are currently single-family homes right now and demolishing them, creating one lot, and then building something commercial.
Well, it's a couple follow-ups. Is one, I'm not sure how you've heard of splitting property. My guess is you can rejoin them. What are the rules? I mean, if the properties are zoned the same, if you had 2 side-by-side lots that were both village business, for example, I'm not sure how that process works, but would they automatically be allowed to join those lots? Or is there a-
Sarah, but go ahead.
We have an application process for combining lots together. There is a process. the major thing that we look at when you're combining properties is that you're not creating a lot that is more than 4 times as deep as it is wide. There's a 4-to-1 width to depth ratio required in the state law. So that's the biggest thing that you're looking at when you're combining lots, is that you're not getting a really deep kind of bowling alley lot in that combination. But if you can get your lot dimensions the right size, I mean, you could combine your property and create a 40-acre parcel if you can get it to work out. You know, there's no limitation on how large it could be.
So if they own the property, they probably could.
Right. There are a couple other things, you know, if it's in a platted sub, it can't be combined with meets and bounds lots, or if it's in a condo development or something like that. Some of that, you know, makes it a little bit more difficult. Or if they're in different sections of the township, you can't combine them together. But in general, you can combine them through application in some way.
And another question, is it, I guess, okay to limit the size? I mean, period, where you say somewhere that you can't have any businesses above a certain square feet?
You can. You would want
Okay.
to make sure that you, somewhere in the township, you would allow them, but you're not required to allow them in every zoning district.
But you can't like limit, you know, anything over 100,000 square feet in the township.
I mean, you could, if you want to say you don't want to have any hospital over 100,000 square feet or retail over 100,000 square feet, you could say that.
Yeah.
I mean, if you had to test that in court, that's a
Well, that's
pretty
what I
large
get at. Some of
building.
that stuff's a little,
Yeah. You know, you're required to provide every use in your township or in the area. In general, it's kind of tricky. You know, somebody could argue that they're not allowed to, I'm going to use a junkyard because they're usually the ones that people don't like and don't want in their community. So you don't have a junkyard in your zoning ordinance, and they can't put a junkyard anywhere in the whole county, say. Nobody allows it. You can be challenged because you're not providing that opportunity for a junkyard. And every community in the county could be challenged. It's not, you know, just your township. But if they come to you and apply, and then you say you need to amend the ordinance, and you go, I'm not going to amend it, and it can't be allowed anywhere, you run into this challenge. So you want to be careful of some of that, you know, as well, just from a planning and zoning perspective.
Does Milton Township have a restriction in size?
I don't know.
Barbara?
I got a question.
Questions?
I have a question, Bill.
Sure.
What if there was 2 businesses in one building? Would it still have to be 15,000 or under? They couldn't try to make it 30,000 if there was 2 businesses in one building?
It doesn't specify that. I think you could. I think you could have a 30,000 square foot and have 2 separate retail businesses, you know, on this list. So if you have, you know, one could be a grocery store and one could be a hardware store, and they're 2 separate, they don't connect.
Well, yeah, you see, you know, a cell phone and a Jet's Pizza or something,
Right.
share, you know, something like that.
Right. Yeah, I don't think because it's retail stores, you know, they're different stores. I mean, I'd have to look through, I guess, more, but just my off the cuff reaction is, could be each one.
What are your thoughts on this, Sarah?
You know, retail is kind of hard. That's something it's usually pretty general. It's a general kind of use. A lot of things are retail. And the square feet, I mean, I understand where it comes from, because a lot of communities are looking at trying to keep big box stores out. So they're trying to do something smaller, which is how I'm sure you're at 15,000 square feet, because you didn't want Walmart or Myers to come in and put up a store. But 15,000 square feet also does allow for a fairly large retail operation. I mean, even Eastport Market, you know, that's not the largest grocery store, but it's not the smallest either. And that helps you to visualize what kind of area that can cover for that. And I don't know. I think because you don't have really good kind of landscaping requirements, that it makes it difficult to just allow something as a site plan review, because you're not able to protect some of the neighborhoods and some of the impacts that are generated.
So excuse the interruption, if I understand you correctly, the ideal way is, if we're going to change any of this, is to not only do consideration of the square footage, but also look at the landscaping at the same time?
I think so. I mean, I don't want to bog down the process, but I feel like that could, should one of these uses, I mean, any of these uses come in that would help to protect the neighborhoods. I mean, I'm looking at, even on here, you've got museums and libraries. Think about what kind of traffic is generated from that use, especially at certain times of the day. When you have the house next door and there's cars coming in, or a funeral home that you have next door to you at certain times, it'd be nice to have a buffer or some landscaping if you were the residential home next door, just to help with the light trespass from the headlights, when it's dark out, and also to help with some of the noise from the cars opening and closing, those types of items.
Landscaping includes not only just trees and berms and all this, but it also includes maybe putting up fencing, or could be
Yeah.
other regulations on, the parking should not be aimed out to the neighbors on either side where the parking is. Things like that can be considered.
Yeah, the location, the fencing, berming, all of that.
Berming is,
Yeah,
that's key.
kind of buffering, requiring that, and you can do for landscaping, on some of those instances, you might say you need to do evergreen landscaping, so then it's year round versus just having, your pretty trees.
I'm all for, if there was a new business or building to come in, to have green grass, have irrigation, have nice curbs, landscaping. By the way, kudos to you. Your store's got irrigation and it's nicely landscaped and they keep up on it. So it looks nice. And I like to see that in the future.
To your point, Jason, where we missed the boat is our newest business in town, Green. It's a warehouse. It certainly doesn't look bad,
Oh, yeah.
but it could look a lot better. I mean, it's just got a little swale out in front. If we were to pin it down and put tighter restrictions on landscaping, I'm sure, I don't know, landscaping, but it could probably look a lot better.
I agree.
Barbara, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I do. What are you thinking about this?
Gee, thanks. What I
You're
was.
next.
What I was thinking about was, I was wondering if there's a requirement of a certain size lot for a certain size building. I know we have setbacks and stuff, but does something say that if you're going to put in a village business, for example, that's 15,000 square feet, the lot has to be at least 3 acres or anything like that?
No, and we could deal with that with doing impervious surface or lot coverage percentages. So then you could get something where you can only cover 60% of the lot with impervious surface. That would help with some of this buffering, requiring, plantings around it, and would provide for larger lots for it. So that would be another option.
That was the only thing I'd been thinking about, Bill, other than what everybody else has been saying and discussing. That was my,
Laura, welcome back.
Thanks.
Your thoughts?
I like the idea of allowing a smaller store and then needing a special use for something larger, so it gives a chance for the community to give any input. I like the idea of berming and whatever it is that would make neighboring homes happier. I don't know that it has to be really specific on landscaping as far as like 12 beautiful trees out front or anything like that, but I do also like the idea of, should we end up with a big box type of store here? If the community loves the idea, fine. But it would be nice if it, like you said, Dollar General's ugly. I tend to agree. But I feel like I've seen a Dollar General, maybe not, maybe I'm crazy, but I feel like there are some stores that they do a variation of to make them fit in, kind of like a Frankenmuth kind of. You might see
Yeah.
big box kind of store put a spin on it to make it fit in. Something like that, I think would be worth putting in there.
Yeah, there are some design standards, and if you drive down 131, you'll notice that because you go along, everything looks the same, and then there's one store and it looks different, and then you go back to the typical store. And I've been trying to remember which town that's in that it's different, because I just saw it a couple weeks ago. So we definitely could do something like that that would apply to all of the uses. If there's certain types of construction, you can either do what it looks like, so brick, stone, or even like vinyl instead of having like a steel pole barn structure. You could also require, maybe this is appropriate in the village business versus the commercial, you could require peaked roofs instead of flat roofs. That kind of helps to fit in with kind of the villagey feel and the residential feel. So you can do some of that. You can also require some windows, a certain percentage of the frontage of the building to have is glass instead of only having a door. Those are some options. And I kind of focus on the village business area just because you have that, like I said, that residential component. So it kind of looks like the neighborhood. It doesn't look so commercial. You're doing more of a form-based code, so you care more about what it looks like than maybe what's in it, because it fits in because it looks like everything else around it.
Just for the commissioners, I'm aware of two designs that Dollar General has. Their largest one is 9,600 square feet. Their smallest one is about 7,200 square feet. There may be more, but that's what I'm aware of, to give you some barometers.
I guess I was trying to imagine, like, what's an example of a 3,000 square foot store? Would, like, the stores downtown in Elk Rapids, what would be like a general size there? I don't know. I'm trying to think of something that would be a good.
Well, they're all kind of joined together, so it's kind of tough to,
Yeah, I can't
point
think of
out.
anything that would be a good comparison. I'll have to look something up.
I can't hear what you're saying.
Oh, sorry. I'm just trying to, if you got a suggestion here, do you know of any business that I can imagine that is like 3,000, 4,000 square foot? That's what I'm looking for. I like to visualize that. I'm having a hard time with that size.
I would probably say something like Chemical Bank, Elk Rapids, or something
Okay.
like that. Would probably be close.
Jerry?
Yeah, a lot of good things are coming out that I didn't think of. Thank you, Sarah. I want to talk too about the building size. Definitely, I think we got to consider that. And also the design standards of a building. That was a point that I had here previously written down in some of my notes. There's so many of these buildings that come in, they look like a box, they don't fit in. I think that's a legitimate standard. This is a side note. I used to go to Sedona, Arizona, and Ronald McDonald wanted to put up a green building, with the arches and everything. They stopped them. They didn't do it. They even offered, I call it a bribe, but it wasn't a bribe, some money to help the community. And
Good incentive.
they said no incentive. I was like, that better. So it was very interesting. So, I mean, you can enforce it if you want to. You got to think it through. You got to be able to enforce it. So whatever we come up with, I would think should be a good standard that everybody can apply it, and it can be applied to across it. Then the landscaping, and that's what I wanted to clarify, the landscaping, not just trees, because tendency to think that of a berming, maybe putting up appropriate fence at the right place. And then you brought up a point about lots being able to be breathable, I call it breathable, where you're not having concrete, everything in. I've seen some communities way back. In fact, when I took the planning course, they used Cadillac as an example of one of the districts over there. The buildings were all uniform. They used up every space. They didn't have the requirement, didn't have a side road to go at them, to get off the main road to go. So you have to go in and out of the main highway to go back and forth. So I really want to see standards, like, what is our standard for access? What are the setbacks should be for all this? And there's, let's see, one other point I had here, 1 second. I know we talk about square footage, size, design, landscaping, quality of the building, I think I'm trying to get at too. Is that a legitimate standard? Going from advertisement and so on, like this. Okay, those are the points. And excuse me, Bill, one last thing. That's what I want to say. Said us doing something, I presume you would ask Sarah to maybe give us something before the next meeting so we can look at it.
You could presume that, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to presume it then. Not us doing to give the input, but giving the ideas. I like the trend that we're talking about here, quality and something that fits the community.
Cole, anything else to add?
Well, just that I would agree with that. I really like the impervious surface and buffering and landscaping because aesthetically that's good, but it also fits in with, protecting water quality, which I think is rather important to many people in the community.
Well, it's, if I just, on that same note, I just want to add to that.
Yeah.
If you look under 10.01 purpose, item B, to maintain and enhance the existing small town character of the unincorporated villages or hamlets, quote unquote, of Eastport and Torch Lake. So what you're saying, that's what you're trying to do, is maintain that look, right?
Right,
Okay.
right. And I think a lot can be done just by the design and the looks of the building and the way it's landscaped and so on to make them fit in nicely with the community.
I would second your,
Microphone, please.
I would second your point about the water quality. I mean, that's the one thing that we're trying to add in. So might as well do it now, here.
Jason? You good? Sarah? I'd like to suggest to the commission, and Jerry hit on, that Sarah, you, and if it requires a special meeting, I'm willing to do it, okay, to call it. But I'd like you to come back to the commission with some language to go in the direction we've discussed. Do you have enough direction to do that?
Yeah, I haven't heard any objections to kind of the design, the landscaping, all of that. So I can definitely come up with some language that we can refine at the next meeting.
Does a week give you enough time?
A week to get it into a packet, so a meeting in 2 weeks?
Yep.
Okay, I can do that.
Okay. So are we all kind of agreement in that direction? Jason, nod your head one way or the other? Okay. Okay, so let's do that. Let's move it back to you to come back to us, and I'll recommend a special meeting next week. Getting exhausted. To look at the language to move forward on this zoning change. Okay? Any other comments?
Next week or 2 weeks? I thought she.
Next week.
Next week.
2 weeks?
Two
She said
weeks.
2 weeks.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. 2 weeks?
2 weeks,
weeks.
yeah, like a week to work on the language
Okay,
and then a
I'm
week
easy.
for you
2
to
weeks.
look at it.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
Or
That's why I
maybe,
clarified.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Thank you.
maybe 10 days or something, but at
Okay.
least give me a week to work on language to get to you and you can have it at least for a couple of days.
Yeah, I like to look
Okay,
at it.
great. Okay,
So that first week of October, we'll give you a call tomorrow and see if we can get something scheduled.
okay. Any other comments before we leave this topic? No? Thank you very much for all your suggestions. Okay, we're going to move on to item number B, ordinary high watermark definition. We passed it at our last meeting. I'd like to make a motion, schedule a public hearing regarding section 2.16 zoning amendments. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Discussion? Any discussion? Okay, a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Sarah, how quickly can we schedule a public meeting?
I think we're gonna miss the regular meeting. We're off by just a couple of days.
Okay,
So, but we may be having a meeting or something to deal with this other part that we could get it onto or something.
Okay.
So I'd like to not wait till November to deal with it and have that public hearing, but we'll have to look at the calendar. I just counted it before the meeting and
Just so everybody understands,
Sure.
we have to meet certain criteria
Yeah.
to get it into the paper and for the people
Yeah.
to respond. And
Yeah.
the calendar won't allow us to do that all the time.
yeah, it has to be in the newspaper at least 15 days prior, and we publish in a once a week paper, so that comes out on Thursdays, and we're just a little bit short.
Okay.
So unless we move the regular October a couple of days, maybe.
That would be unique. Okay,
Well, we can talk. We'll try to figure something out, Bill.
okay.
We can talk.
Okay, so that's completed? We're
Yes.
going to move on to item number C, Chapter 20, Zoning Board of Appeals, amendments to the Section 20.
Yeah, so this is something the zoning board of appeals looked at. They looked at a bunch of different things, but have a couple of changes that they would like the planning commission to consider for the article that's dealing with their board. A lot of it has to do with kind of timing. You'll see on that first page, the number of days to remove some of that information and some rearranging of items and standards. One of,
Sarah, if I could interrupt you,
Sure.
I'm sorry. If we need to, we have Dave Barr in the audience.
oh,
the
Dave,
chair of the
I'm
ZBA?
sorry.
Okay, we may lean on you a little bit on this one.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know.
yeah.
We may lean on both of you.
So there's a couple of different details, and then probably one of the biggest items, which is kind of hard to see on my copy, it's in green, it's item D, it's gonna be page 5 of this section. It talks about, what the appellate shall do, and one of those items is number 4. It talks about for a dimensional variance that the lot line should be staked by a professional surveyor prior to the hearing. This is something the zoning board of appeals talked about. They're requesting variances, property owners are requesting variances, and the property lines are not marked for when the ZBA goes out and does inspections to be able to see where it's at. There's a lot of people that think they know where their property lines are, and they don't. By no fault of anybody. It's just until you get it staked by a surveyor or professional that does it, or unless you know where your corner markers are, it is difficult to determine. So it's something the ZBA felt was an important item, was to have that properly marked to be able to hear their application.
So the overall thought process of this change is to tighten up the specs and
Yeah.
add something new?
That section, and then the rest of it's kind of some clarification and if there's some redundancies.
Can you, it was nice that they noted move to 2006 on 2005B. That was nice. And then 2010 is just gone, so not needed.
Yeah, that's,
Good call.
yeah, 2010, so this is a part, some of it, the 30 days, the shall be heard within 30 days, it makes it difficult for publication deadlines sometimes, like we run them with special use permits. But then also, that second line, it says a copy of the decision shall be transmitted within 120 hours or 5 calendar days. Those things, that's not required by state law. And was one of the things I'm going, don't put it too tight of a restriction on yourself, because then that puts the township, if we don't do it within 120 hours, then we're at fault. We have the problem. So I'm not saying not to notifying them, just, we need to not put a restriction like that on ourselves. So, and then, so section 20, the new black section 2010, that was section 2011 in your current zoning ordinance. So when we do the amendment, we'll have to change that numbering.
Cole, anything to add?
I think she covered it pretty well, unless somebody has any questions.
Any questions? Barbara? Laura?
I think it's nice that we went over it, and I am totally fine with not making, I think it's great that we went over this together and had Sarah walk us through it. And I am fine with us not making any changes until we just until we make it better and cleaner anyway. So
So you're okay with the way it is, the changes?
for now, I wouldn't make any changes now if we're going to go ahead and do large changes, like reorganizing stuff.
With the rewrite of the ordinance, is what you're
Yeah.
talking about? Like,
Yeah.
put this in when we're working on the
Yeah.
rewrite?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
What couldn't we say, though, I know you're doing a rewrite, and there's 4 of you working on it. Couldn't we say, this is what, we think is good as part of the rewrite, and having incorporated that, giving you the basis from what was there? Because I don't see any problems with approving this.
I would say yes, as long as with the rewrite of everything else, you don't end up like needing to move something from somewhere else into this or move,
Yeah.
I-
Yeah, I imagine that in the rewrite, some of this language that's in here will get moved or shifted or,
Yeah, that's no problem, but I mean,
Yeah.
But in the short term, this is
I
acceptable.
think we should say that, my discussion here, that accept this as the basis, and then the rewrite naturally, you're trying to move sections around, and we have to relook at it. But it's about the language where it clarifies things.
Just for clarity, Beckett and Rader is looking at all of our zoning ordinances. And it's going to be a long process, an expensive process. We also have a steering committee that's new. They'll be reviewing Beckett and Rader's recommendations for zoning changes to make them comply with the Michigan laws and to tweak them to make them better for our community. But it's a long process. Some of these items, and I'm taking this one for face value, this needs to be corrected sooner than later. So we can move, the zoning board of appeals can move forward with things. That's not to say that Beckett and Rader can't come back with the steering committee and change this in a year and a half, or whatever, as times change. So that's kind of why we're looking at this tonight. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Any other comments?
Where are you at as far as, how close are you to getting to this section?
we just started the drafting of it. We had a steering committee meeting, at the beginning of September. They
Yeah.
kind of laid the framework. And so I've been working on drafting, some sections, and they'll start reviewing those sections, in October. So the hope is to have the draft plan or draft zoning ordinance to the planning commission mid to late spring next year. So then you can start your review and public hearing on it to go through that process.
Were you at the ZBA meetings when they were doing this? Were you helping them?
I was at a couple of them, and there was a couple I was not, because it's been on multiple agendas.
So did you help with this language?
Most of this language the ZBA came up with, but I approve of it.
Okay, great.
Did you say you approve of it?
Yes. I
Any
was
other
gonna say
comments?
Jackie made the edits to the document, so I can't take credit for the edits, but I know that the ZBA knew what they wanted to say.
If I could, Bill, I would also say that if I remember correctly, Steve Langworthy, that fellow who has helped us out several times, some of these were his suggestions from that training session
That's true.
a couple months ago.
Any other comments? I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion to approve changes to Chapter 20 of the zoning ordinance as discussed at this meeting. May I have a second?
I'll second it.
Discussion?
I think it's good, and I found it clarifying some issues that was addressed previously. So the people working on the rewrite, I thought it's good.
Any other discussion?
I would just say that I would take their word for it. If it's painful right now and they can't wait, and it's been like this for years, I'm sure, but if it would make a big difference for them, sure.
Great. Any more discussion? Let's have a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay. Just for the sake of this thing, I'd like to have a roll call vote on this, please. Barbara?
Yes.
Laura?
Yes.
Chairman says yes.
Yes, Jerry.
Cole?
Yes.
No.
Okay? That is 6 to 1 in favor of, it. Motion passes.
5-1.
5 to 1. Bad math. Okay, thank you.
So you're approving those changes. Are you doing a public hearing for those as well?
Yeah, I mean, that's next.
I'm sorry. No, I don't,
Okay, we're approving this, and obviously, as we're moving forward, I'd like to make a motion to schedule a public hearing regarding Chapter 20 zoning amendments. Can I have a second, please?
I'll second that.
Discussion? Any discussion?
How does that work, Bill? Does it public hearing and then it goes to the Torchlight Board?
You'll have a public hearing, then it comes back to you to review, and then from that point on, it moves to the board. It moves to the normal channels.
Okay.
It's the Antrim County.
It goes to Antrim County and it
And then
circles
back
back.
to us.
Okay.
Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. So with that, I'd like to call for a vote, please. All in favor would say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The last thing on our agenda is the adjournment of the meeting. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting. Do I have a second, please?
I'll second that.
Okay, discussion? Vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you very much. Meeting is adjourned.